Welcome to the GI Nutrition Show. I'm Amy McCrea, registered dietitian and CEO of Grounded Root Nutrition. Today's topic is, I've been diagnosed with celiac disease. What do I do? Let's first start with what is gluten and where is it found? So gluten is a protein found in wheat, rye, and barley. And there are many different variations of these products, and they can be kind of tricky to decode in our nutrition label. So we know wheat starch that's going to contain it, but buckwheat is actually gluten-free. It's one of those odd grains that for whatever reason they put wheat in the name of it, but it's fantastic. But then you can have couscous and farro and bulgur, and those are actually gluten-containing. They are derived from wheat. So what's really awesome, there's a website that you can go to. It's beyondceliac.org. And they have a really great list of is it gluten-free. So I'll include this list in my blog for you so that you can access it and know which grains are gluten-free and which ones are not. So it's a really good list for you to reference, especially at the beginning when you're trying to navigate, is it gluten-free or is it not? Another one to look out for is malt. And so malt is often derived from barley, which is why you can't have name brand Rice Krispies. They use barley malt and it is not gluten-free. So take a look, make sure the product doesn't have malt. If it does have malt and it specifies a different type that is gluten-free, sure, you can have it. But if it doesn't specify the type, I would avoid it. Likely it is from barley, okay? Now you might be asking, what about alcohol? Alcohol is generally triple distilled. So we think of our vodka or our bourbons, and the bourbons are initially created from a gluten-containing grain, but the process of distillery removes the proteins from those alcohols. So they do become something that you can have. They are gluten-free by the time they hit the shelves, and they are safe to consume. Now, gluten beers, on the other hand, absolutely not safe, even gluten-reduced. So the ones that are reduced, they still have gluten in them. And for you, you need to remember that everything has to test under 20 parts per million. 20 parts per million is the equivalent of a breadcrumb, a very small breadcrumb. So it doesn't take much for your body to launch an attack, and then you get damage to your intestines, which we're working so hard to heal now that we're going to go gluten-free. Now, you might be wondering about oats. You'll often see oats on a lot of lists for gluten-free. The reason being is that while oats themselves are gluten-free, they're often grown either in a field that previously harvested wheat or they have wheat harvested right next to them. And so the wind will blow some of those wheat spores over onto the oats, or in the time of harvest, sometimes the equipment will actually harvest wheat because some of those seeds might be growing amongst the oats, which is why it's so important for you, especially at the beginning, to buy only certified gluten-free oats. Now, some people might be wondering about Cheerios. They have developed their own equipment to sort grains, and they do batch testing to make sure that their products are gluten-free, but it's not guaranteed. So it's one of those foods that I encourage my patients to really think about. If they're very reactive, if they're still having symptoms, I want you to take oats out of your diet. Twofold. One, the protein found in oats does closely resemble the same protein found in wheats, and our body sometimes does what's called molecular mimicry, and it thinks it's the same protein, and so it mounts a response. We don't want that. But also, it is chance that you are actually a hypersensitive individual, and your parts per million needs to be a little bit lower. So those Cheerios type of products is not going to work for you, but a Bob's Red Mill certified gluten-free oat, totally fine. So you'll have to kind of ebb and flow with that part a little bit. Oats are tricky. There's not a standard response that I can give my patients. Generally, I say for the first 6 months, take oats out of your diet, and that will really make sure that we get great healing, and then we can reintroduce them, starting with the true certified gluten-free products, and then eventually adding in those Cheerios. Now, you might also be wondering about shared facility versus a may contain type of a label. Shared facilities are safe. Shared facility often indicates that the manufacturer has taken great length to separate. They have food allergy awareness. They understand the need and why things have to be gluten-free. So they're generally considered safe. And now the shared facility label is actually voluntary. Companies don't have to disclose that. I like that when they do. I feel like it's a more honest and reputable company, and I want to honor that. We've not had any issues in our household with shared facility products. May contains are a different story. May contains often indicates not only shared facility, but shared maybe belt, shared equipment, and that equipment might not be cleaned adequately. So you can call the manufacturer, you can find out more about their process. You can also visit Gluten-Free Watchdog. They check out a lot of these products and see, are they actually gluten-free? And so that would be worth the while for you to do a little bit more research. Now, what about your kitchen? How can we make your kitchen gluten-free? Let's first start with your toaster. It's our big offender. There's really no way to clean a toaster and get every last breadcrumb out of there. After all, one breadcrumb is going to make you sick. So I want you to have your own dedicated toaster. I recommend it be a different color and that you also not keep it on the counter or near the other one. Have a totally different toaster storage area for yourself. Same with toaster ovens. Toaster ovens sometimes have the crumbs depending on how they're being used, and so they're not necessarily safe. I do recommend utilizing toaster sleeves though. They're great. So if you don't use the toaster very often, and maybe you just want a piece of toast here and there, a toaster sleeve might be perfect solution for you. You can get them off of Amazon. Sometimes your local store will carry them. And it's just, you put your bread, toast, bagel, whatever it might be in the little sleeve, stick it in your toaster, push it down. It protects it, keeps it nice and safe. They're also really spectacular for traveling. We travel with them all the time. Makes it so that we can go to a hotel that has a free breakfast. We bring our own gluten-free bread and we can utilize their toaster equipment without any type of an issue in the morning. So love toaster sleeves. In terms of utensils, you're fine to utilize all the utensils you've been using. Chopping blocks and knives are the one area that I just want to ask the question, do you ever return knives that are not clean? So maybe after slicing fresh bread. If that's the case, then your chopping block needs disinfected, as do all the knives, and there needs to be a new rule that everything goes in there has to be clean. If you've already got that taken care of, awesome. The next piece of equipment I like to touch on is your cutting boards. Now, if yours have been through it and you look at them and you see residue, maybe there's a lot of discoloration or there's some deep grooves, replace them. Get some fresh ones, and then they can be shared because those grooves aren't really dark or really deep, and you can wash them. Stoneware, that's a whole different story. So if you like baking on a pizza stone, you're going to need to get yourself a new one that's going to be dedicated gluten-free, because it's really hard to get all of the gluten residue out of stoneware dishes. Cast irons are also another area that you'll need to replace. You've got to have a dedicated cast iron for gluten-free. You can't use one that had previously been used for gluten. Because as you know, the nature of cast irons, you don't really scrub them, right? They keep some of that residue in there. And so you're going to have that continue constant exposure. Mixers. So think about your hand mixers to make cookies. Generally, I recommend replacing these because if you're a messy baker and that flour has continually come up and being sucked in the fan in the back, those spores are permanently in there and they can become an issue for you. So I do recommend utilizing a new mixer if that's all possible. Next, you want to consider the foods that you're going to double dip in. So whether that be butter containers or peanut butter, mayonnaise, those are really the top three most common ones that I see come to mind. Those are just double dip havens. Those are just kind of a recipe for disaster. So get your own or figure out a system that works in your household. So in ours, when we travel, sometimes we'll stay with families that have a little bit more gluten exposure. They have maybe 4 or 5 of the members that eat gluten. So we're going to write GF on all our products. And then we also travel with rubber bands. I love rubber bands. We put them around them, cover that lid. It gives the other individual pause for thought while they take off that rubber band, because the rubber band is just kind of gluing them in. And then it's a single dip. So if they're making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and let's say they didn't quite get enough peanut butter, guess what? You need a new knife to get more peanut butter out of the peanut butter jar. And so that's a great thing to do. If that's too complicated, maybe you have younger teens or younger kids in your house and you're the only one that's gluten-free, by all means, get yourself a dedicated product, have a little dedicated shelf that's just for you. And lastly, when it comes to your kitchen, let's talk about the sponges. It is a good idea to have a dedicated gluten-free sponge so that you know that anything that is cleaned with that sponge is going to be gluten-free. Having said that, it's not always possible. Maybe your house is mostly gluten-free. We have 3 of the 4 of us are gluten-free. We have 1 that eats gluten. And so her stuff, generally, we rinse it really, really, really well. And then we do utilize the same sponge. Our sponges also go through the dishwasher every single night to really rinse them and clean them and make sure that they are safe. If we feel like she's had a big baking project, lots of flour, anything like that, then we do use a different sponge. But if she's just cooking on the same pan, that's a different story for us. So really kind of gauge what is being cleaned with that sponge for if you need to have a dedicated one. So I hope this is helpful, gives you some ideas for where to get started on a gluten-free diet. Navigating reading nutrition labels is also figuring out how to set up your kitchen. To learn more, be sure to watch for my upcoming course on celiac disease. It's scheduled to release in fall of 2024. And with that, there also will be a support group, and there'll also be many options if you feel like you need one-on-one services and working with me. Those options, those add-ons will also be available. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Please visit my website, groundedrootnutrition.com, to learn more about how I can become a partner in your health journey, or contact me directly at hello@groundedrootnutrition.com. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again soon.